everybody, it's Sam Amico, hoopswire.com here on Hoopswire Live on 330 to go. We have ourselves yet another show. Regular season winding down. I just looked at the schedule for the Cavaliers on last night. I looked last night after they slogged their way to a victory over what's left of the San Antonio Spurs. And Sunday, the Cavs have a home game against the Los Angeles Clippers. Then guess what? Only 2 more weeks of the regular season after that game. They've got the Clippers on Sunday, and what a brutal stretch that they've had after this West Coast swing, which is odd to have a West Coast swing this late in the season. But that's the way the schedule worked out. I think partially this in-season tournament, if you remember that way back in November, is partially to blame for some of these clunky schedules. And the Cavs certainly have had a brutal schedule. The West Coast swing, which, you know, they had lost 4 straight for the first time this year, and now they're on a 3-game winning streak. But they did the West Coast, then they came home and had to play the Spurs. And then if you're watching this live Friday night, they're going to face the Detroit Pistons, who, by the way, won't have all-star guard Cade Cunningham, who's out with a calf bruise. I think right now the Cavaliers and their fans are just waiting for the playoffs. I think the Cavs have kind of, and I don't say this as a negative, I say it as human nature. The Cavs have their 5-game lead over the Celtics with, 9 games to go. So they'd really have to have a meltdown, the Cavs, to lose that number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. I don't foresee that happening. 9 games left. I think they can win 6 of those. That's all it would take. They could probably win 5, and that's all it would take. Maybe even 4. If the Cavs went 4-5 in their final 9 games, they'd probably still win the Eastern Conference. Because you think about it, then the Celtics would have to go undefeated to pass them. And I don't foresee that happening either. So it's going to be, probably next weekend. I would think that the Cavs would officially wrap this up. Now, what they're doing now, of course, is they're trying to balance getting guys rest while still winning games. And they've been able to do that these last 3 games. They rested Donovan Mitchell against the Blazers in Portland and won that game. They rested Evan Mobley and Ty Jerome against the Spurs and won that game. It was not a pretty win, but that's okay. I mean, they're clearly dragging right now. Some teams aren't. The other teams at the top of the conferences aren't. The Celtics aren't. The Oklahoma City Thunder aren't. I mean, these teams are still performing pretty well. The Cavs are winning games, right? They've won their last 3 before that. So if you really look at it, they've won 20 of their last 24. Are they playing beautiful basketball right now? Probably not. They'll get leads, and then they let their foot off the gas. And they're very meh, we got this about this season. Just get the win. They're ready for the playoffs. I get the sense the fans are ready for the playoffs too. Now, let me tell you a little something about hoopswire.com. The page views historically, February is one of our greatest months. December, January, February are always great months on hoopswire.com. They keep us in business, as does July. We'll get to that in a second. But March is always terrible. And we know there's nothing we can do, really, to change that. Now, by terrible, I mean, we're not making millions upon millions. I mean, it's still, we're fortunate to be able to do this. But in March, it's not good. Now, why is that, you might ask? Because these are the dog days of the NBA season. They're not the exciting time. It's the last few weeks of the regular season, and you just got to play out the string. The players are playing out the string. I get the sense Kenny Atkinson It's kind of like, because if you ask him after some of those losses during the losing streak, he's like, eh, he's not shouting Greg Popovich like proclamations about how the team needs to get better. He's just like, yeah, I mean, it's March. So we get that from a player and human nature standpoint that the Cavs are still winning games. They don't look as good as they did during the 16-game winning streak. No big deal. They're ready for the playoffs. They just want the playoffs to get here. You know what they really need? They need that week off that you get. The regular season will end April 19th or whatever. I'm sorry, it ends before that. But it ends on a Saturday or Sunday. And then the Cavs won't play again. Their playoffs won't start again until the following Saturday or Sunday. So they'll have a whole week, maybe even 8 days off between the end of the regular season and the start of the playoffs. And keep in mind, that's 3 weeks away. And they need to get there. They need that week to refresh and just kind of say, you know what, now we will take this unbelievably seriously from the number one option on the team to the number 15. You're not getting that right now. It's a little disappointing. I had a scout last night said the Cavs probably should have waited another 2 or 3 weeks to mentally check out. Or he said at least like with 6 games left. But they're coming off that trip. Kenny Atkinson said for the first 4 days of that West Coast trip, which lasted 10 days, he said for the first 4 days, I felt like we were in the air for 3 of them. It felt like we were in the air traveling nonstop for 3 straight days. So, and every team has to go through that. So it's not excusing the fact that they went on a little bit of a losing streak. But after they won 16 straight, I think the Cavs thought, you know what? Human nature, we've kind of got this wrapped up. We talked about this last week. Well, what about the number 1 seed in the entire playoffs? I look at it like if you open the season 15-0, then you go on a 12-0 winning streak later, and then you go 16-0, a 16-0 winning streak later. So there's 3 really long winning streaks. If you still can't get the number 1 seed in the entire playoffs, there's nothing more you should be expected to do. You shouldn't be expected to go 70-12. I mean, it's not realistic. Only 2 teams in the history of the NBA, which has been around since 1947, when I graduated from high school. But honestly, 2 teams have done that, won 70 games. Well, it seemed like the Cavs needed 70 wins to get the number 1 overall seed because the Oklahoma City Thunder have just been that brilliant in the Western Conference. But I wouldn't, to me, I don't care so much about the number 1 seed overall. It'd be nice, but there's no guarantees the Thunder are getting out of the Western Conference. And this is the NBA. You have to win playoff games or finals games on the road if you're going to be a champion anyway. Even if the Cavs had the number 1 overall seed and they played the Thunder in the finals, I would say the Cavs have to win a game in Oklahoma City to win the championship, even with home court advantage. So I don't look at that as such a huge deal. You obviously have to keep the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and I'm just going to come out and say the Cavs are going to do that. Because really, in these last 9 games, I think they could go 3-6 and still hold that number 1 seed, and I don't foresee them going 3-6. So, back to hoopswire.com, which is why I know you all showed up to talk about hoopswire.com. Our page views are terrible this month, and there's nothing we can do. And I think the fans have kind of checked out as well. They're like, well, the Cavs are cruising. Just get us to the playoffs. Human nature. Yours truly feels that way. I am ready for this to be over, these regular season games. Please, can we get the playoffs started? And you just want the Cavs to stay healthy. Kenny Atkinson said this. We ran a story on the website last night, and he said, right now it's about staying healthy, and focusing on resting our key players is more important than scouting and strategy. He said, we have a plan for the playoffs. We're not ramping that, we're not throwing that out right now. But he said, for the most part, we know who we are. We know when we're at the top of our game how we're going to play and how we can do. Cavs are not at the top of their game. They've won 3 in a row, against non-playoff teams. As of Friday, obviously the Pistons. And this is Pistons don't have Cade Cunningham, but this is a playoff game for them. This is not a playoff game for the Cavs. The Pistons are still fighting, and what a wonderful, magnificent job that J.B. Bickerstaff has done in Detroit. They're 41-32, the number 6 seed in the Eastern Conference, which means they would avoid the play-in tournament. The Pistons would get the Knicks in the first round. If the playoffs started today, the Pistons would face the Knicks in the first round. The Knicks would have home court advantage. I like the Pistons' chances in that series. Although we've seen how J.B. Bickerstaff did against the Knicks a couple years ago when the Cavs had home court advantage. So, who knows? But the Pistons are a young team. Young teams tend to not get very far in the playoffs, although they do have some nice veterans. But back to hoopswire.com. So why is this historically our worst month and there's nothing we can do? Not just because these are the dog days of the NBA season, though that really plays a role, but the trade deadline has passed. So, we're not going to be running too many trade rumors on there because the trade deadline passed last month. The window to sign free agents for playoff runs has pretty much shut. So you don't have a lot of people signing free agents. Most of the rosters are set. And we did have some stunning news here, and I'll get to that in a second. But there's not a whole lot of kind of newsworthy things. It's these guys are playing out the string, not just the Cavaliers, but really the entire NBA. Now, a lot of other teams are fighting for playoff positioning. From 4 through 9 in the East is still wide open. Western Conference, it's like 2 through 9, so those teams are all battling for playoff position. The Thunder are going to start resting guys here. They're going to start losing games. It's very important to the Thunder to get the number 1 overall seed in the entire playoffs because they have it now. And that's the same thing with the Cavs. When you have the number 1 seed in your conference, you don't want to take too far of a step back. You don't want to back into the playoffs, right? You want to go in with a sense of, okay, we're ready to go. I think the Cavs are there now. I think they're like, whatever happens here, it's irrelevant. We just got to hold on to this number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. But other than that, just do that. But Kenny Atkinson said, as I said, strategy and scouting are second to staying healthy right now. That's their main concern. So on top of that, as far as the website goes, the Cleveland Browns have, quarterbacks showing up, opposing quarterbacks showing up to Panera or Chipotle or wherever in Westlake, supposedly. And unless it was Kirk Cousins, AI Kirk Cousins in Westlake, who knows? But those things overtake the news, especially when the Browns have a high draft pick, which is like 85% of our lives, right? So we have the NFL draft coming up. That's big talk. Obviously, March Madness is the number 1 thing in March, as far as sports fans are concerned. The Guardians started their season. So we have all these other things that are huge in March. College basketball tournament, baseball starting, the Browns still being a mess, and nobody knowing what they're doing or really having any clue, and probably including the Cleveland Browns themselves. But those things dominate the sports news cycle. Meanwhile, here we have the NBA, who's we're kind of sputtering along, playing out the string. So, there's not a whole lot of reason to go to HoopsWire. I'll tell you what, sometimes in the morning I'll wake up as the owner of HoopsWire, I'll wake up and read all the other sports news, and I'm like, well, if I'm not clicking on HoopsWire, how can I expect our readers to do it? So, yeah, we had some shocking news in the NBA. And that was the Memphis Grizzlies in 5th place, usually in the Western Conference, usually in the top 2 or 3, have been in the top 2 or 3, at least 2 to 4 range all season. Fired their coach, sent out a press release, fired their coach, Taylor Jenkins, who's had a really nice run there. You know, last year Memphis was super injury prone. All of their stars were out, and they didn't make the playoffs. The year before that, they finished with the number 2 seed in the Western Conference under Taylor Jenkins. We've got, 9 games left in the regular season? The Grizzlies could still finish second in the Western Conference. And they fired their coach. There's been no explanation. All we know, what we have on HoopsWire so far, is Ashish Mathur, our excellent writer there, wrote that the Grizzlies met with Taylor Jenkins face-to-face this morning. And really, just a stunning decision. And I'm sure we're going to hear from the NBA Coaches Association. And guess what? Taylor Jenkins just became the hottest off-season coaching candidate across the NBA. You got to think it's more than basketball here, because the basketball in Memphis has been pretty good. Cavs went down there, I guess it was 2 weeks ago from today, went to Memphis and won pretty easily without Donovan Mitchell, which I was stunned, because I'm like, the Grizzlies are a great team. Very good. Maybe not great, but very, very good. And then they lost the other night, the Grizzlies to Oklahoma City Thunder by like 19 points. And I don't know what could have happened. And I'm sure we'll get more details later, but why would you fire your coach who's really kept your team in Western Conference contention? I mean, I thought totally healthy, the Grizzlies, and they are getting healthy again with John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., who's the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. And Desmond Bane's a good player for them. He's the guy that got into the little scuffle with Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland. They're a very physical, aggressive team. And I thought they played playoff-style basketball. So, yeah, stunning decision. And we've been given no explanation. I got a press release from the Grizzlies with a comment from their general manager, but really didn't tell us anything. Just thank the coach. So that's a stunning. When I look at stuff like that, I just think, okay, so the Cavs are kind of dragging to the finish line. That's the worst thing you can say about your team. They're dragging to a finish line when they really have the Eastern Conference pretty much wrapped up. And by dragging, I mean not winning a game by 20 points. They're just winning games by 10. They beat the Spurs. This game was a dogfight throughout, the Cavs versus the Spurs. Darius Garland was, I think he was 2 of 13 shooting. With a minute and a half left, the Cavs led by 3. Against the Spurs. Darius Garland couldn't hit anything. The Cavs turned it on. Max Strus got a loose ball, drove the lane, kicked it out to Darius Garland. With a minute and a half left, Darius Garland hits 3. Cavs up 5. So, the next possession, the Spurs miss. Jared Allen gets one of his 16 rebounds. Talk about Jared Allen in a second. But he grabbed the rebound. The Cavs went down the court. Donovan Mitchell missed a long-range 3 at the end of the shot clock. The Cavs wanted to run the shot clock down, which they successfully did. Donovan Mitchell missed a long-range 3. We've got less than a minute left. Chris Paul of the Spurs gets the rebound. Max Strus and DeAndre Hunter team up and wrestled the ball away from Chris Paul. Almost like, we'll be taking this, thank you very much. And they did. And they kicked it to Darius Garland, who had just hit a big three after not being able to make a shot all game. He drove the lane, hit a layup, Cavs up 7 with 20 seconds left. They won by 8 points. What does that tell you? What does that last minute and a half that I just described tell you? Oh, we're only up 3 against these guys? Okay, let's win the game. That's what that tells me. We've been checked out mentally 90% of this game, and we're still winning by 3. Well, let's finish the job. Boom, boom, boom. Game over. I looked up at the clock. I'm like, 20 seconds left. It's over. It felt like this was a dogfight. They just went on a mini Cavalanche to just, yeah. Good night. Safe travels, And Jared Allen, 2 points in the first half. Kenny Atkinson said, Jared's determined to play all 82 games. Jared says, yeah, I want someday to be able to look at Basketball Reference and see my name and see 82 games next to my name on the little stats on Basketball Reference, which admittedly is my favorite basketball website out there, with HoopsWire being a distant second. But that's Jared Allen's goal. He wants to play in all 82. And I think that, Kenny Atkinson will be able to talk. Kenny Atkinson tried to talk him into look, seeing 80 games next to your name is still pretty cool. Even 79. Jared's like, no, I want to play 82. And Kenny's like, I can't talk him out of that, and I'm not going to. If that's important to him, then that's important to everyone else on this team. But he said he really looked like he was dragging in that first half. And he had 2 points at halftime. Jared Allen finished the game after 2 points at halftime, 1 basket, 1 shot, with 28 points, including a career high for a single quarter, 19 points in the fourth quarter, and 16 rebounds. And he was 10 of 11 shooting. That to me is, we'll go through the motions here just to get to this number one seed and wrap this up and go through the motions. We got a game tonight. And then it was, okay, going through the motions is not serving us well enough. So Jared Allen just punished the Spurs. The Spurs went to this little small ball lineup, obviously with Victor Wembanyama out for the season. They also had their point guard that they got from the Kings, De'Aaron Fox, who's a great player. He's out for the season. But the Spurs went to the small ball lineup, and Jared Allen just punished them. So, that's kind of where the Cavaliers are today. Some people are like, they need to play hard all the way through. And you know what? I think that's a fair assessment. But I also think it's human nature to say, we'll probably beat the Jazz, Trailblazers, and Spurs regardless. I don't know what's going to happen with the Pistons. I haven't seen the injury report yet. I don't think the Cavs will release it until 2 o'clock. But and the 3-3 to go is taped at 4 in the morning. At least that's the way it feels to me sometimes. This is the first time I've talked to anybody all day. It's the first time I've used my voice. But they'll probably rest somebody, if not 2 somebodies. Could be Darius Garland. I don't think it'll be Donovan Mitchell against the Pistons. They play the Clippers at home Sunday. I'm guessing everyone will play in that game because then they have 2 days off before they play the Knicks. So, these are all just guesses. But this is, again, we heard Kenny Atkinson. Rest is more important than strategy right now. Kenny Atkinson said, I told them that on the way home from the West Coast trip, he said, I felt corny. I felt like I was like they probably think, what's he trying to be, our dad? Kenny Atkinson said, I told them, guys, you need to get some rest. Don't be going out. Don't be doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Just go home and, take it easy. Take a load off for a little bit. He's like, but that's really our priority right now, is just get to that finish line with the number 1 seed in the East. So they're 59-14, right? Okay, so that means there are 9 games left. They would have to go 7-2 in those 9 games to tie the all-time franchise record for wins in a season, which would be 66. I got to tell you what, my 9th grade algebra teacher would be so proud of me right now, because I think I got that right. And that's not something she would have often said about me in 9th grade. Actually, algebra, I was great. Algebra, I aced, but in geometry, and, I know kids are on spring break, so they might be watching this, kids that are still in high school, so I shouldn't say this. I can tell you this. I've never once used geometry since my sophomore year of high school. At least not that I'm aware of. Maybe I used it, without knowing I used it. But here's where 330 to go just goes black. It's like the screen just goes off because Amico's telling kids they don't need geometry on his basketball show. But anyway, Cavs will have to go 7-2 the rest of the way to tie the 66-16 season of 2008-09. Let me just be the first to break this news to you. They don't care about that. They don't care about the 66-16. I think if it happened, they'd be okay with it. I think if they've won 65 games and it's the final game of the regular season, I think the Cavs will say, you know what, let's go for this record. Let's not kill ourselves for it, but let's go for it. Put in the starters, play the starters, 15 minutes, and see if we can do this. That's the only time I think the Cavs would care about it. Same thing if they go, 8-1 or whatever the rest of the way, or say they're 7-1 heading in that final game and they've already matched the record. Yeah, I think they would try to go for that win. Frankly, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't. I think that we have to keep in mind that for the Cavs, these games aren't all that important. They just want to get that number 1 seed, which, like I said, they should be able to clinch that by next week. For these other teams that they're playing, the Pistons on Friday, the Clippers on Sunday, the Knicks on Wednesday, who are battered, beat up, missing Jalen Brunson. He may not be back before the playoffs. All of those teams, those 3 teams I just mentioned, are fighting for playoff positioning and the Clippers want to get out of the play-in tournament standings. They want to avoid that. They want to finish in the top 6 in the West, and they are on the brink. They're on the border. These games are huge for them. Obviously, I said the Knicks, the Pistons, same thing. Number 6 in the East. I think they've pretty much got that locked up, but the Pistons are only 2 games out of 4th. So if the Pistons keep winning and the Pacers and Bucks lose a few games, the Pistons could end up with home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. So, yeah. The Cavs, meanwhile, are like, let's get this number 1 seed locked up so we can, take a breather. The Celtics have been charging hard. They've won 7 in a row. They're on the West Coast. They won in Phoenix. Without Jason Tatum, blew them out, which is no great accomplishment because you never know what you're getting from night to night from the Suns. And they beat the Kings. The Kings beat the Cavs last week in Sacramento and have been utterly terrible since. They finally got a win last night. They were awful. They lost to the Bulls at home. And the Bulls, by the way, unstoppable. Did you see that shot last night? Unreal. To beat the Lakers, Josh Giddey hit a half-court shot at the buzzer with the Bulls down 1. Might I add, right in our friend LeBron James' mug, LeBron went to defend that half-court shot. Josh Giddey buried it. buried the Lakers. Did I sound too much like Stephen A. Smith there? Because I don't want to do that, because that would make LeBron very mad. Based on, somebody asked me the other day what I thought of LeBron ripping Stephen A. on the Pat McAfee show and Brian Windhorst, who also is from Akron and went St. V like LeBron. And Brian responded to it, classy as he always does. But somebody asked me what I thought, and I thought, boy, I just hope LeBron never gets a hold of my stuff. I'm glad he has no idea who I am, probably, at this point. He knew who I was when he was playing here, but I'm assuming he forgot all about me. So I'm like, I'm just glad I never got on the Pat McAfee show. But as usual, I've gotten way off the rails here, which is, kind of the way this show goes. But I think the Cavs are in a very good spot in terms of getting this wrapped up within the next week, the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. Then you're going to be able to start resting guys. I think the Kenny Atkinson way is going to be more to keep everything going. I don't think they're going to see a mass sitting of 6 guys in the same game. We've seen that before during the LeBron era, when they would have their playoff seed wrapped up and we wouldn't see LeBron for the final 3 games. I don't think that's the Kenny Atkinson way. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's what Kobe Altman and Kenny Atkinson would like. I think they would play their starters for 5 minutes, almost like preseason games. Play your starters for a few minutes in each half, and then you don't see them again. Jared Allen, certainly, if he is approaching that 82-game mark, will not sit at all this year. He may play 5-10 minutes in each half, once the Cavs get this number one seed wrapped up. And I think that's where they are. I think the Cavaliers, just as the title to this show would suggest, the Cavaliers and their fans are just ready for this regular season to end. The roster's set. This is the roster. Could they potentially sign somebody on the last day of the regular season like Tristan Thompson did with the Lakers a couple years ago? There's always that possibility, but I doubt it, because there'd be too much other stuff involved there. But it's possible. If you want to add another big guy, I doubt it. We saw against the Spurs, they ran out Dean Wade at center and DeAndre Hunter at power forward. I do like when they run out Javonte Green. He got some minutes, and I think he brings a lot of good energy. I like watching the guy. He reminds me of me at Old Man Basketball. It's like, he clearly has no idea what he's doing out there, but it works. So, yeah, that's the Cavs. I think the team that you have right now is the team you're going to be seeing in the playoffs. And I think Kenny Atkinson hit the nail on the head when he said, we know who we are. We know how good we can be already. We already know those things. These last 9 games, yeah, we want to win. We want to get our record up. We want to stay number one seed in the East. There's no doubt about that. We're not going to go out. But he said, I also get it when maybe we're not playing our best right now. Because he's like, that's the NBA. This is just the NBA. So, with that in mind, I would encourage you not to freak out if the Cavaliers lose to the Pistons, which my urging does no good based on my Facebook comments on the Amico Hoops Facebook page. The freaking out levels are for a 59-14 team. I can't justify them. I'm sorry. I know fans short for fanatical, but I can't justify freaking out over 59-14 and people worrying, they're not playing as well as they did during the 16-game winning streak. And listen, sometimes I'm watching them and I'm like, come on, pull it together. Win the game. Well, they've done that. They've done that these last 3 games. So, yeah, great run. Just waiting for the playoffs. Next week, the message will probably be the same. You'll be like, oh, it's Hoops Wire Live with Sam Amico on 330 to go. And guess what? I know what he's going to say before the show even starts. But you'll at least tune in for the dad jokes. So, with that in mind, thank you so much for joining, and go Guardians. Cavs and the Guardians. These are the way your franchises should be run. More the Cavs probably even than the Guardians, but the Guardians are up there. Okay, when you were playing that, you know what? This is my freshman geometry teacher. When you were playing or watching basketball, you were using geometry nonstop. And you know what I hate to admit? That is absolutely correct. You are. I use so much math that I was promised would not come with a writing job or a TV or radio job. I'm stunned. I'm stunned. So I think now 330 goes taunting me with the fact that I use geometry. I will say this. Our show, the Full Court Cleveland, with Booby Gibson, who's not on this week, and yet he was at the Legends Corner last night. So I just walk up to him and I'm like, what, I'm not a legend enough for you? And the answer, of course, was no. But this week the show airs all weekend, but is also on, I believe, as a guy who's on the show, I should probably know when it's on, but I believe it's on at pregame 6 o'clock tonight. Yeah, it's definitely, I'm pretty sure it's on right after the game as well, after Cavaliers Live post-game show, Full Court Cleveland with Rafa Hernandez-Brito and I, and we're talking about the week ahead for the Cavaliers, and we also talk a lot about off-the-court stuff. We talk about the NIL and college basketball and how that's been impacted, and I have no idea what else we talk about because that was like, we taped it earlier, so I don't really remember. I'm trying to remember what I had for breakfast or even if I had it. So that'll be on this weekend. It'll be running all through the week as it always does throughout the season on FanDuel Sports Network, which also broadcasts Cavs games. So thank you so much for joining, and we will talk to you next week. And that's it for now. Go Cavs, go Guardians. See you then.